What's up, everyone? Welcome into the All 22 NFL podcast, the official podcast of the All 22 Fantasy Football platform. It's the only fantasy football game with full 53-man rosters, including offensive linemen, where you get to choose personnel packages and have access to PFF grading and advanced stats to make decisions each week. To learn more and sign up, go to all-22.com, where you will see we have two new subscription tiers. One is the All Pro tier, which will basically is it the All Pro tier?
Yeah, all pro.
All Pro.
You nailed it.
It's the All Pro tier, which will give you basically the access that you're used to, but at a discounted price. We've reduced it from $49.99 to $29.99, which is super exciting. But if you're a new user this year, you will be able to play for $9.99, which is even better, right? We also have now a starter package, which is $1 for this year, and then it'll renew $14.99. And this tier will give you more limited access. You'll get, to still play in unlimited leagues, but you won't get access to premium PFF statistics like you do at the better tier. So it's never been a better time to sign up. And just apologies in advance that I sound like this. I am fighting a sickness, but couldn't miss out on a podcast with Ray. Ray, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm doing great. So I could be a nice guy and carry the load here, but I feel like you have a lot of strong opinions about this next topic in this coming episode. So as much as I'd like to, I feel like you're just going to have to you're just going to have to play hurt here, because I feel like this is your wheelhouse, this coming episode here. But I'm excited to talk about it because we're in this lull, this dead period of the off season. We got 5 weeks or so till training camp begins, right? OTA is mostly done. So everybody that got all excited about their favorite skill player running around in shorts at half speed, now is just that lull before everybody comes back for training camp and, the real stretch run before the season starts. So what better way to go through this lull than together talking about tight ends and how great they are and where they should fall in your all 22 rankings and in the overall scope of the NFL. So yeah, I couldn't think of anything better to talk about today than tight ends.
If I thought you were a nice guy, I would have asked you to do the intro, because honestly, that was brutal and it was painful to do in my current condition. But, you are who you are, so it is what it is. Tight ends are exciting, right? And, yes, they are on the lower end of positional value, but they aren't the lowest. And it's also one of those positions where it's extremely rare to get a good one. And when you get a good one, you almost want to hold on them forever, because it gives you such an advantage at that position, right? We've seen that with people, in any fantasy concept with Travis Kelce over the years. George Kittle has kind of become one of those as well. You're right. I do have a lot of opinions on this topic, because I really felt last year we saw this new influx of talent and promise in a lot of young guys, not just the rookies either. There's, guys that have been in the league for 2 or 3 years that really started to show something of themselves. Even a guy like David Njoku, who's been in the league for a few years now, really kind of stepped up into a different role where the team relied on him, and you saw that so much more, and it translated in all 22 in their PFF grading. So I am excited to talk about this. And at the top of the list, my tier 1, if we're going to just jump into it, I had a group of 5, and the group of 5 might surprise you a little bit. But I'll just jump into it. Sam LaPorta is in tier 1. I don't think that's a shock to anybody. Mark Andrews I have in my tier 1, who's battled injuries the last few years. George Kittle, Trey McBride, and Kyle Pitts. So Sam LaPorta on the Lions was a rookie last year. He's 23 years old, still 76.4 grade as a rookie in all 22. So maybe that 76.4 isn't as high as the impact you saw in maybe your traditional fantasy leagues, right? But it's still very, very good for a rookie tight end. And again, tight ends have the most difficult kind of task to learn of any position in the NFL, because you're asked to be an elite receiving weapon, which LaPorta was, but you're also asked to be a tried and true blocker, right, in the run game, which, as you can see here, Sam LaPorta struggled at a little bit in this rookie year with a 55.1. So while I'm really high on LaPorta, I do think there is still parts of his game that he's going to have to develop to be this surefire tight end 1 in all 22. I'm not sure he's there yet. We'll talk about it. But Sam LaPorta made that list. Mark Andrews has been a very consistent fantasy tight end for many years. He is getting a little bit older. I bet it's surprising to some people to see that he's going to be 28 years old when he plays this year. But that year-over-year consistency is just so hard to pass up, right? It's been so good for so long. And then the last couple of years, he's just battling injuries and not staying healthy and not really staying on the field. It's definitely troubling. You could see the run blocking grade for him too, just wasn't that great last year. But this is a guy, again, it's kind of ultra reliable. It's one of the few guys at the tight end position, if he's playing football, he's going to grade well for you. So Mark Andrews makes my tier 1. George Kittle, still 30 years old, will be 31 probably by the start of the season. 87.6 grade last year, and it's been 80s or 90s every year for the past 5 years. This is, again, one of the elite tight ends that we've seen of our generation, of this last 10-year period. He's a great football player, does every aspect of the game well. You see that run blocking grade, unlike the other guys. It's almost at an 80. That offers a different element, and that's why you're seeing him be that 87 grader. He's absolutely a tier 1 guy for me. Trey McBride, that's where it starts getting a little tricky. But Trey McBride, still 24 years old, 76.3 grade last year, coming off of a rookie year that was kind of disappointing, 50.9. But that Cardinals organization has been a mess for a few years now. They're starting to clean it up. Kyler's going to be back this year. They get another receiving weapon in Marvin Harrison. I expect that receiving grade to continue to improve. I expect that run blocking grade to continue to improve. And I expect the situation just to get better in Arizona, where I want to trust a guy like this. He makes this tier 1 for me because I think that the upside is just too high. He's still so young, and he showed us that he can play at a high level worthy of that tier 1. So I'm in on McBride. And the last guy, Kyle Pitts. Some people might be saying to themselves, how are you including Kyle Pitts after being in the league for 3 years, only having that 68.1 grade? But you forget, Kyle Pitts is still 23 years old. He is younger than McBride. He is the same age as Sam LaPorta, who was a rookie last year. If you look at Kyle Pitts' rookie year and compare it to LaPorta's last year, there's an 80.3 grade as a rookie for Pitts, higher than the 76.4 for LaPorta. The thing is just the situation in Atlanta has been a mess. Pitts obviously has not risen. The run blocking grade is abysmal, 31.2. But I still have such hope that if they use him the right way, which will be less run blocking, more receiving snaps, right? Maybe lining him out wide, lining him in the slot, more as a true receiver. I expect this guy to be successful. I expect him to get back to that 80 grading. And I just can't give up on the talent that Kyle Pitts has. I just really can't. So that's really my tier 1. Ray, I'll let you go, but tell me if I missed anyone that should be included in that tier.
I think the reasoning for all those to be tier 1 players is fine. The only thing is, does someone go, well, hey, they're so hard to find. Brock Bowers, there are many out there who say he's the best tight end prospect of this generation, and maybe the only other one with an argument as far as prospects coming into the leagues go is Kyle Pitts from back in 2021. Those are really the only 2 elite tight end prospects that we've seen. Obviously, LaPorta was a great prospect. We talked about how high we were on him prior to his rookie year this time last year. But as far as pure prospects go, a lot of people love Bowers. It's just a matter of how it's pure projection, obviously, for a rookie. But how do you think he's going to fare, given that he does have Michael Mayer also at the tight end spot in Vegas? For the most part, you expect Mayer to be more that inline type of player, while Brock Bowers will be that slot option, catch a lot of passes over the middle, kind of the get open, quick separator type, which lends itself to high grading at the tight end position. When you look at the list of tight ends, of the top tight ends in the league, it correlates pretty strongly with yards after the catch and yards after the catch per reception, that sort of thing. And that's exactly what Brock Bowers does really well. And so if he has someone else at the quote unquote tight end spot that is going to be relied on to be more of that inline complete player, and the Raiders will focus on Brock Bowers in the passing game, allowing him to do what he does best, he's going to be really, really good at it. Now, the quarterback situation there and everything else in Vegas is kind of a mess. But, if people want to take a risk, right? I talk a lot about risk tolerance, and Brock Bowers, that might be your cup of tea if you want to just take that, you want to take that gamble of him playing very well in year 1, being like a potential Sam LaPorta as a rookie. And then as he grows from there in a more complete sense, like most tight ends do in the league, you got yourself an elite tight end at, 22, 23 years old moving forward from that point on. the reason it takes tight ends so long to develop into great players in this league is because, like you mentioned with when you were talking about Sam LaPorta, that run blocking. I mean, he comes from Iowa. They're clearly asked to run block at Iowa. I don't have to say that, but that adjustment when you have to, again, be a great receiving option, but also a great option in the run blocking game where you're not a giveaway for the opposing defense when you're on the field. You know, coaches have to trust you, and it takes a while to earn that trust and just develop physically to be able to do that. That's why it takes tight ends 3-4 years plus in the NFL to reach their peak. So I'm not concerned. We talk about the completeness of someone's game and not just the receiving aspect of it in all 22, but I'm not concerned if someone can show that elite receiving ability early on in their career that can mask that development that's taking place as a blocker overall in that second part of their game. And Bowers might fall into that bucket. So I agree with the 5, but I'm not going to, I can see why someone might just say, hey, what about Bowers? If you're cutting off your tier 1 at top 5 and you have Bowers at 6, okay, fine. But I can hear the argument for Bowers belonging in that top tier too, because he's a hell of a prospect.
I have 2 positions in fantasy football that I give the rookie pass to, and that's receiver and running back. Running backs are more valuable as rookies than any other position. Receivers, typically kind of the same thing. It's like the younger they are, the more promise they have. You kind of know what they're going to translate into. It's not that hard to see. That's why I had Marvin Harrison so high in his rankings when we did receiver. I don't think tight end is one of those positions. Every other position in the NFL other than receiver and running back, I actually take a little bit of weight off and I say, okay, if you're a rookie, it's actually a negative for me because I haven't seen what you can do at the NFL level, right? Quarterback especially, right? It's like if you're a rookie quarterback, I don't care how good you're expected to be, like a Caleb Williams, you're going to move down my rankings typically, just because I have no idea how it's going to translate because it is so hard to get that translation right. Brock Bowers is one of those guys where I've talked about this a lot when we were reviewing his tape. He just doesn't translate perfectly to me as an NFL tight end will. You're right. He has a lot of that Kyle Pitts where he's a much better receiver than he is a blocker or a traditional tight end in that instance. So it needs to be in the right situation that he ends up being successful. And you're right, having Michael Mayer there might actually take some of that stress off because maybe they use Mayer as the blocker and let Bowers line up more as a receiver out in the slot, things like that. So will it work out for him? Possibly. I just don't know if I'm ready to just say, yeah, it's going to be great. He's going to do fantastic. Put him into that tier 1. I have him in. So I have a tier 2. He's in tier 3, but my tier 2 is one person. So, and the tier 2 could have been.
That's a cop out. That is such a cop out.
A little bit. But Travis Kelce's my tier 2. We talk about how when there's that elite player that grades out at an elite level, there's such a value to having that when essentially you could, if you open Kelce's card, last year was a down year, 78.6, but every other year is basically in the 90s or high 80s, right? That advantage that gives you over everybody else, because most of the other guys we're going to talk about, not named Mark Andrews and George Kittle, have basically never graded out as an 80 ever in their careers, right? Most of these tight ends are mid to low 70 graded players, even the good ones, right? So is having that 90 grade at a tight end, like with Kelce, such an advantage for you that it warrants taking him at 35 years old this year over some of the young promising guys, even a Bowers, right? I think a lot of people are going to have to figure that out. Shout out to Feds for having Travis Kelce. But yeah, I don't know. And I could easily just say my next 2 tiers are flipped and Kelce's tier 3 and those guys are tier 2, but it'll be a conversation.
I mean, what if he's just, I mean, we've already heard it's not even rumors or murmurs at this point. I think it's just sort of the plan moving forward is the word or the term pitch count has been thrown around with Travis Kelce for this season as far as, hey, yeah, obviously he's a big part of the offense, but the Chiefs have gotten more weapons for Pat Mahomes to rely on and kind of throw the ball to, and not everything is so heavily focused on Kelce. We want to make sure he's primed and ready for the playoffs. If that's the route you're going, that's essentially a tacit acknowledgement that this is not the same guy he has been in the past. Obviously, he's still very good, but what if the norm is this again, this high 70s type of grader where he's still grading out as like the sixth or seventh best tight end in the NFL, but that's it. And sure, maybe in the NFL playoffs, then he's fine for the home stretch and he's that top rated guy. But that doesn't help you in all 22 when we're running the platform during the regular season like all other fantasy football games. So I with that in mind, given the age and just the fact that his most recent year was his worst year since 2015, which is still very good. So that sounds way harsher than it is, but it was. Is that the new baseline or close to it? Where even if there is a bit of a bounce back, we've seen the last of the elite grading because he's just not going to have that much on his shoulders where they're going to rely on him as much. He's going to have those week winning, just overtake the matchup type of games as consistently as he had in the past. So to me, that screams more tier 3, since this is a dynasty kind of go forward type of platform and lens that we're looking this through. That's tier 3 for me.
Okay. I mean, I think that's fair. And that's a good argument, right? Like, are we predicting that the downfall is here, right? Is that 78.6 a predictor of what's to come? It might be, right? And I think another thing you didn't mention that happened is they drafted tight ends in back-to-back years. So the Chiefs are obviously game planning for this, right? Jared Wiley this year, Noah Gray the year before. Like, they are game planning for a life without Travis Kelce. They know that it's coming. So how are you valuing that? And again, it depends on how your draft goes and what your needs are and how old your team is. And if you're win now, all of that stuff matters. But in terms of just ranking these guys, I kind of agree with you, Ray. I think he probably is, like, I would take him behind the young guys that are in my tier 2. But let's start with the tier 1. Tell me how you start to rank these guys. I think for me, I really struggled with it because age is such a factor, right? I think, LaPorta, McBride, and Pitts are all 3-4 years younger than Mark Andrews, and they're also like 6-7 years younger than George Kittle. But the high-end grading of Kittle and Andrews is just a level above those guys, right? So like, I don't really know how to begin that process, because I think with any of them, you have that 3-year window. I think all of those guys, all five of them, all 5 of them have that 3-year window to look forward to. I don't think there's an immediate drop off to be concerned with.
No, there's no immediate drop off. I mean, Kittle did have the core muscle injury / surgery this offseason, or he apparently lost 30 pounds. That's more offseason fodder. It's not a big deal to me. I'm sure he's going to be fine and back to where he's supposed to be physically come training camp. But given the scarcity of tight end, because everybody we've just named is a very good player, and the next few names are going to be very good players. And then after that, it's like a graveyard. Given that scarcity, I tend to lean on the young side. So because when a position is as scarce as tight end and it's so hard to find a quality guy, when I have one at a young age, I want to hold on to that as long as possible. So if I can take a Sam LaPorta, I don't have to worry about this thing for the next 7 years. And I could tight end is just a luxury pick for me. If I ever take one in a rookie draft from now until 2031, that means a lot to me. That's just one less thing I have to worry about when building my roster. So for me, it definitely is Sam LaPorta, number 1. It's Trey McBride at number 2. Again, poor situation overall. Offense was a mess. He still performed really well, and now they're getting better. Another weapon over there, Marvin Harrison Jr. So while the volume may be a little bit less than it was in the second half of the year for McBride, situation's much better. The offense is more open. I think you see the core of the Cardinals between Harrison Jr., Trey Benson, Michael Wilson as sort of the complimentary wide receiver, aside from Harrison, and then now McBride at tight end. That's their core skill group that they're going to go with for the next 5+ years, it seems. So I'm totally on board with that. I think McBride's stock is way up. Andrews right after, little concerned about the injuries the last couple of years, but none of them are really debilitating or anything like that. So still at 27, going to be 28 years old. I would have Andrews at 4 and then Kittle, just given the age factor here. And I think he's still performing very well, but at how long? I think that's where I'd have him there. Did I mention Pitts? Did I just completely skip Pitts?
You skipped him and you went to 4, and I was a little confused by it, but I thought it was
Pitts. Yeah, Pitts is after. So it's LaPorta, it's McBride, and then it's Pitts, because it's not even that I think their next play caller and everything is just going to be so great. It's just that it was so ridiculous what they did under Arthur Smith with Kyle Pitts and Drake London and those skilled players the past couple of years. That, I mean, Pitts has already had 1,000-yard year. He's going to be used as a wide receiver. So the fact that his blocking game is lacking and is always going to be lacking is not a concern, because he's not going to get another 230 run block snaps from an inline tight end position from here on out like he did last year. That's just not going to happen. He's going to be essentially a big wide receiver that's just listed at tight end, like a little mini hack, so to speak. So again, just putting some faith in actual like adult play calling and offensive coaching from here on out. I would then put him at 3, then followed by Andrews and Kittle at 4 and 5.
Ooh, okay. So McBride versus Pitts is a tough one for me to swallow, right? I think McBride is a very promising player. He showed us that, just not as flashy. The name's not as flashy. That all is obviously true. I think he's got good tight end size, right? 6'4", 246. He can be an inline blocker if they need him to. He can do those things. I'm not sure he's special like Pitts is, right? Like, I don't know if there's that level to his game where he can be like this really special player. I could be on an island with that, right? Pitts, I see that, right? And I think with the new play calling, I think with Kirk Cousins being there, and even more so than Kirk Cousins, with new quarterback Michael Penix Jr. being there, that just seems like a match made in heaven for me, right? Like the quarterback that's going to trust with jump balls down the field. Like we talked about that with Penix when we watched his film, when we were grading him during the offseason. It's Penix just trusted his receivers so much and let the ball rip, right? He just threw it up, let his guys make plays. There's not a better receiver in the NFL potentially to do that to than with Kyle Pitts. There really isn't, right? Maybe Pickens, right? We talked about that. Like we were like, oh, if Penix goes to the Steelers with Pickens, I don't know. Pitts might be the same level of jump ball, just launch it down the field and let him take that chance, right? To me, like that match might be perfect. It might be like really, really good. I still hold out hope that Pitts is my tight end too. He's a year younger than McBride still. I know he's been in the league longer than McBride, so he has a lot of experience. I like everything the Falcons are doing, and I like Pitts, and I just trust that he's going to be that guy.
The one thing that I think was a tiebreaker for me is I think McBride offers a bit of a safer floor, given that he is a pretty decent run blocker for a young player. And so you had that as a bit more of a complete player. But you made a bunch of arguments that I would typically make as far as like the shoot for the moon type guy and going for the upside when it comes to Kyle Pitts. I just think the second aspect of McBride's game is going to continue to improve with run blocking as it already has. And I think he's gonna basically set a really high baseline floor for him as a player week in and week out, and then the receiving prowess on top of that is what's going to send him over the top. But I could see the argument for Pitts.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The floor for McBride is higher. I agree with that. I think that's almost like a fact at this point.
And you seem to be more floor guy, so
yeah.
Maybe
not when Pitts is in the conversation.
Oh, okay. So,
and I also struggle with Andrews not
principled.
being tight end too, because we've seen such high end grading. It's consistent. When he's on the field, it's good, and he's done it for a long enough time that I trust it. And he's only 28 years old. Like he's going to be playing for 3 to 5 more years at this level. It's like, how do we just not take this guy as tight end too? Just because he's missing time.
It's not about him. It's like, it's not you, it's me. It's not about him. It's about everybody else. It's about the other names on this list that deserve to be there. That's all.
Okay. All right. Well, how do you want McBride at 2?
Don't say it like that.
Because I'm gonna give you one here, and you're gonna give me one there.
Yeah, you know what, McBride's gonna be at 2 because you just admitted you're not holding strong on your principles when it comes to floor guy, because Kyle Pitts is involved. So because you're waffling, I think we have to put.
All right, McBride is 2, Pitts is 3. I'm good with
we call
Andrews.
That cowardice on this podcast.
4, Kittle is 5. You got me on when I'm sick, so it's just like it's hard for me to keep up, right? Just blaming it on that. All right. So we got our top 5. And I will say one funny thing. My formula that we always talk about, where the rankings that are currently in the system are based on my formula, it screwed the tight end position bad. So you're going to have a really hard time finding guys that we're talking about. Just a heads up. So I talked about my tier 2 was just Travis Kelce. I think we both agree we're actually going to move that. He's going to be tier 3. The other guys are going to be tier 2. So my new tier 2 is Brock Bowers, Cole Kmet, Dalton Kincaid, and TJ Hawkinson, and that's it. What do you think about that? There are definitely other guys that could be in this conversation, but I think that the age of the guys that I said, right, Bowers, Kmet, and Kincaid, they're all super young. They've shown me something already. For those that don't know, right, Cole Kmet on the Bears, 25 years old, graded out 73.7 last year. He's a similar kind of guy as Trey McBride, where he can be definitely that inline tight end. He has that high floor. That system is getting so much better. I think this guy is going to be used as a blocker because I don't think the tackles are as good in Chicago as others seem to think they are. I think that gives a lot of credence to what Kmet can be. I think they're going to use him really well. Dalton Kincaid, 24 years old, still going to be 25 next year, 67.2 grade last year as a rookie. They don't have a lot of good receiving weapons out there in Buffalo. I can tell you that, right? They drafted Kincaid to be that guy as a tight end. I think he's going to continue to grow and become that for them. I do think that. I like this guy a lot. And then TJ Hawkinson, right? This is the only guy that's making this group that's a little bit older, 27 years old, but a 78.8 grade last year, 70 the year before. This is a guy we kind of are starting to see what he can be and what he is, which is this not extremely high tier, right? He's never going to be at least in my opinion, he's never going to be the Mark Andrew, George Kittle, Travis Kelce tier, but he's good enough to be just under that, right? If he grades out some years low 80s, I wouldn't be surprised. But I don't ever see him getting to that 90 graded seasons that we really want when we're talking about that elite group. So this is a top 10 guy, but I don't think he's ever a top 5 guy. Decent blocker, really good receiver. Just again, dealt with injuries throughout his career that's limited him and honestly his development to date. But I like what I saw last year, and I think that there's a lot of good to come. So I'm high enough on TJ Hawkinson to include him in my tier 2.
Yeah, you darn well should include him in your tier 2. I think Brock Bowers to me has to be the very top of tier 2. It's an upside play, but if I'm on the clock, I'm not taking any of those names mentioned over Brock Bowers. I would probably only pause to give consideration to Dalton Kincaid, because like you mentioned, there's just a lack of weapons over there in Buffalo. I think he's going to be a target hog. He's going to be that guy. He's athletic. He performed well as a rookie. I think they have big plans for Dalton Kincaid. Kind of looks like a high school football player from like a late 90s movie or something like that. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Dalton Kincaid. I think to me, those are the clear top 2 names in this tier. And then then it gets a little tough. I think I would have Hawkinson. There's something about Kmet. I feel like he just lacks a little bit of that just extra gear or popped into his game where he's going to be steady. He's going to be solid. He's going to be reliable, but he's never going to be terribly explosive and take over an offense or a matchup like that. I just don't see that with him.
It's 260. Yeah. That's a legitimate thing, right? 260 is like a small tackle.
Yeah, I mean it's great tight end size, and if that's what you're looking for a tight end, it's great. But he's not the game breaker athlete prototype profile that a Bowers or a Pitts or some of these other names are here that are that sort of athletic mold where you can you give yourself a really high ceiling with that. I mean, he's good in all of that, but he's not that next level gear. I think I just don't see that to his game. So I would definitely not include him before those 2 names, and probably would have him just after Hawkinson, because Hawkinson's just a bit better, has done it longer, but is still actually just 26, turning 27 in a couple weeks. So I think I would go at this tier, I would go Bowers and then Kincaid and then Hawkinson, followed by Kmet. I think those are the top 4 in this tier for me.
That's how I would have it too. That's actually how I have it written down. I think the argument between Bowers and Kincaid is a good one that people are going to be having with themselves. the 3-year age difference between them, even though it's just one draft year, it's kind of a big deal, right? So
Mhm.
if we see Bowers come out and look a little bit slower than a Kincaid in terms of grading, just know that he's a lot younger. So it might take him an extra year to get to that level, although a lot of people don't think it will, right? So I'm okay with that though. Let's give Bowers 6, Kincaid 7. We said Hawkinson 8, which I agree with, Kmet 9. One thing I disagreed with that you said a little bit earlier, but coming back to it now, right? You said it's kind of this top group and then it's a wasteland. I don't necessarily agree with that anymore. I think there are legit 20 names at tight end that I'm very comfortable with, right? 20. That means that most teams should have a tight end 2 that they like if you're in a 12-team league. After that, it definitely gets concerning. And like there's a massive drop off after 20. But there's a lot of young guys entering the league, right? There's a lot of rookie tight ends that are further down this list that I don't have in that top 20, but could very well surprise me. So just wanted to kind of make reference to that before getting into, again, my tier 3 of Travis Kelce. I'm just going to give you my tier 4, which is actually a tier of 2. And we could talk about maybe these next 3 guys and then tell me if you think that we should include anybody else. But Travis Kelce is in my tier 3, and then my tier 4 is 2 guys. It's Jake Ferguson on the Cowboys, 25 years old, 71.9 grade last year, showed so much promise when he was healthy. He did miss a couple games, I believe. Just things that reminded me a lot of the Travis Kelce-esque play where he took over some games. They really relied on him, and he took over some games as the top weapon in games right behind CeeDee Lamb. Besides that, he was fighting for yards, right? He was making catch after catch, fighting for yards down the field. He's also 250 pounds, so he's big enough, strong enough to be that run blocker and disguise himself as one, even though he really is this kind of next level receiving weapon and just developing to be that, right? Like I saw a lot in Jake Ferguson last year. You could see Lomba Leaps have him. That's me. Like I do believe in him. I picked him up last year because I saw a lot of that in his game that told me like, hey, there might be a really good reason why the Cowboys didn't go get a replacement for Michael Gallup this year. There could be a very good reason, and the reason could be Jake Ferguson. The other guy on my list in tier 4 is Pat.
I think they're still paying Ezekiel Elliott, but yeah,
could be that too. Pat Freiermuth on the Steelers, 25 years old as well, going to be 26 next year, 65.3 grade this past year, but the years before that were actually better, right? 2021 as a rookie, 72.3, better in 2020, 22, 75.5, and then last year, a little bit of a dip. I think that entire Steelers organization struggled a little bit last year with Justin Fields. I don't think they had the momentum to be this great team. I think you see that reflected, right? The tackle play was also bad, so they had to rely on Freiermuth more as a blocker, which he can be, and he's proven that. I expect a big bounce back year for him. I expect him to kind of actually go a little bit higher than that 75.5. I wouldn't be surprised if this year we're talking about Pat Freiermuth as an 80 graded guy, one of the top guys in this kind of top 10 range of tight ends. I love the pairing with Russell Wilson. I like the idea that he can block, but I like that they shored up the offensive line so that it's not that they have to rely on him and he's going to have this huge workload. He also dealt with some injuries this year, so he missed time. This is a really good football player and one that surprised me a little bit out of the draft because he did, to me, look a little bit more like a true blocking tight end as opposed to just being this like a good receiving weapon. He proved to be more than that. I like what he can do with the ball in his hands. I like the way he gets angry and fights for yards. He's reliable too, right? Like this is a really reliable guy. I like both Jake Ferguson and Pat Freiermuth a lot. Honestly, if I'm a betting man and I'm drafting my all-22 team, I'm probably waiting on tight end until that tier, and that's when I'm getting my first tight end. I want one of those guys. I want either Freiermuth or Ferguson. That's where I'm starting my journey at tight end. Let me know what you think.
I think those two names are the names that are most likely to ascend themselves into a higher tier with performance this season. Freiermuth dealt with nagging, I think it was knee injury, for even when he, came back and was on the field, he was not himself. He was not 100%. He dealt with injury basically all season. So people kind of forget how good and tough he was his first 2 years in the league as that complete tight end. He was kind of following the normal development arc of what one would consider a very good tight end in the league, which was, okay, you have a solid rookie year. You have some flashes, you grade pretty well. have a bit of a steady improvement in 2022. Then heading into year 3, terrible offensive situation, which I mean, we knew that was coming. And then the injury, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And so year 3 wasn't what many had anticipated, but he's still 25 years old and has already shown that he can be a complete player as a good receiver and a good blocker when healthy overall. So with a new offensive system, a better offense, better quarterback play, yeah, there's no reason to not have a bounce back year. We could be then talking about him 12 months from now as, a top 8 tight end or so in the NFL, who is discussed with that second tier of guys after the elite of the elite, with age factored in as well. So I think those two names definitely are the most likely to elevate themselves among the league. The thing with the Cowboys is they have a historically friendly tight end offense. Dak does a great job of layering throws down the seam and over the middle, which just feeds right into Jake Ferguson's game. We also saw this with a name we haven't mentioned yet, Dalton Schultz, before Ferguson came on the scene in Dallas as well, where Schultz had some great seasons there with Dak Prescott before moving to another great situation in Houston. But as we see with their moves, he's not necessarily going to be a focal point of that offense here moving forward, which is why he wouldn't necessarily make this tier for me. So those are for sure the top 2 names there. I mean, if I had to pick one or the other, just because we know what this offense looks like and how great it can be, I would go with Ferguson over Freiermuth, but it's you can go either way on this, and either one can really ascend themselves after this season.
I would do that as well, but are you taking either of them over Travis Kelce?
Yeah, probably. I'm probably taking him. Yeah, I'm no brainer taking Ferguson over Kelce. I'm like 50-50 on Freiermuth, which I guess is what.
No brainer, dang.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't draft 35-year-old players. I just don't do that. I don't even do that at quarterback.
Yeah. You failed to mention to the people that you also failed to win championships, right? Which is probably related.
Not true. I had the most points scored against last year in this league. They don't want to hear this. You know the rule, right? If you hear the intro, nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Your fantasy team.
Freiermuth or Kelce, I guess it's a coin flip, right? It's basically what position you're in, but like that's probably a good line. I'm going to put Freiermuth at 11. I'm going to put Kelce at 12. All right. So
fair.
People, you could hate on us, but I think that's really where we're at with a 35-year-old tight end. I don't think there's that much left in the tank that I would take him over a 26-year-old really promising player. Okay, next 2 tiers literally could be interchanged, and I want to know which one you think should be tier 5, okay? I'm going to say 2 groups of people, right? Luke Musgrave, Ben Sinnott, Michael Mayer, Isaiah Likely. That's one of the tiers. The other tier is Dalton Schultz, Evan Ingram, Dallas Goedert, and David Njoku. So the reason I have those 2 groups separated, and I think that they're probably the next 2, is because one is this really good group of promising players that is very young, hasn't had the chance to really prove it at a high level, but showed enough flash at some point that it's enough to be excited about, right? And guys that we really liked in college, guys that were drafted really highly, all of that, right? The other side is guys that are now kind of getting a little old, right? Going to be 28, 29, 30 this year, where there's not that much left in the tank. You probably get your 3 years, but that's probably it. And they've never graded extremely well where, they're fantastic grading and they offer that bonus on top of what they are. So I guess that's my question, right? We're looking at David Njoku's player card right now. We're seeing very low 70s and high 60 grades, right? He's going to be 28 years old. It's good grading, but am I taking this over the promise of the young guys that are grading? Honestly, not that far off from this, right? Guys that are still very young, beginning their career. I really struggled with that. So I'm curious if you can help me.
You include Mayer among those young guys?
I definitely do. Yeah, for sure.
Because I don't.
Wow.
I think he's never going to be a game breaker. I never thought he would ever be a game breaker, and now he's got Bowers there as well, who's going to be the more receiving oriented focal point of that offense at that position. I've never really saw it with Mayer, but now even when you just add a situation to the mix, I don't see the upside there where I would consider him over a player like an Njoku or even like a Goedert, who's 29, but just kind of, he feels like a young 29. I don't know. He consistently plays well. He's in a good situation. I would take both Njoku and Goedert over someone like Michael Mayer. Yeah, maybe that's your answer then.
I don't know if it is,
because they're not that old. They're not that old. And
no, but they're also
he's 28.
It's not just about the age, right? So I said you're going to get your 3 years. You're going to get your 3 years out of both of these groups.
Yeah,
but the grading's not that high, right? It's not like you're getting this older player that's grading through the roof, and that's why you're doing it, right? Like that's why you're drafting Kelce. That's why you're drafting Kittle and Andrews, right? Like those guys grade at a completely different level. Njoku, Goedert, Ingram, Schultz, they don't. None of them do, but they grade consistently well, right? Goedert, you were talking about him. Great situation, grades pretty well. But what you failed to mention is like he's been injured a ton and he's missed so much time, right? So it's like he's 30. You know, his 3-year window is a short 3-year window if he just doesn't stay healthy the whole time. So I like you're saying he's a young 30. I don't know if that's true. He might be like a very old 30.
Like a forearm injury. That doesn't age you, I don't think, right?
Go to his weekly summary and go through the past like 3 years. Like, all right, so he missed 4 weeks in 2023, missed 5-6 weeks in 2022. Okay, so
he's
he missed
just 2 and 3. Yeah.
So the past 1 game in 21. He missed like 9 games in the past 2 years. That's a lot.
I mean, so that's why he might not. That's probably why he's not a tier higher though. But Michael Mayer, that's not what I'm not choosing that over him. I think now Ben Sinnott maybe. I think it's just personal preference here because I'm higher on as a prospect Ben Sinnott than I am someone like Michael Mayer. So if you're not comfortable or you don't deem that the grading of some of these vets in this tier are enough, you don't feel secure enough in that, you feel like you can get most of that from a younger guy, then by all means, I wouldn't begrudge anyone for taking Sinnott here. I wouldn't expect high grading year one, but I think it really comes down to once you're at this point, it's who you like as a player more so than anything else, because the options do get slim pretty quick. So if you have conviction about a guy, I think that's what you go with, as opposed to maybe following some type of profile or method around age or around offensive system or just around, weekly consistency. I think it's just, do you like the player at this point? Because the clear cut guys, whether it's because of their upside or because of their consistency, I think they're already off the board.
Yes, I agree. Like this is right. This is like one of the tier breaks, right? After 12, there's a big tier break, which means everybody should have one tight end.
Which means I called it a graveyard.
It's not though. This is a group of 8. After this, there's definitely a big step back as well. But this is a good group of 8, right? Like you can start any of Schultz, Ingram, Goedert, and Njoku any week and know that you're going to be fine. They're going to grade fine for you. But yeah, it's like you didn't mention anything about Likely or Musgrave yet, but like those guys, Sinnott and Mayers, to me, it's like I might bet on some upside before taking one of these older guys. Schultz has been great.
So hold on, sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Why don't you have Tucker Kraft in that instance? Like if you have Musgrave there, why not Tucker Kraft?
Yeah, I definitely could. I think Tucker Kraft, at least body type, the way he moves, seems more to me like the inline blocking tight end, which takes more time to be successful at in the NFL, right? 254 pounds. Musgrave is like a pure receiver, right? And I think, again, when I talked about running back receivers tend to do better earlier, whereas tight ends don't because they have to run block a lot, then Kraft is going to be asked to be that run blocking tight end a lot more than Musgrave will. The reason you're seeing Tucker Kraft that last 6 weeks of the season doing so well is because Musgrave was hurt. And it's almost like they switched roles. And Tucker Kraft became the receiving tight end during that time. Did really well, but I don't know if he gets that role over Musgrave. I think they're higher on Musgrave than they are Kraft. But I do like Tucker Kraft too. I think he's on the conversation today. I just don't know if he's in that tier of guy.
Maybe. I mean, I would like to see, and we don't have this benefit yet of a full season now that they're not rookies anymore. what the long-term plan is for both of those guys in Green Bay, because I could see it justified for both of them having a significant enough role in this offense, but we kind of have to see it play out because all of a sudden it's pretty darn crowded in Green Bay where you have a lot of good receivers. You have these 2 tight ends. You don't have like this bona fide, number one X type that, is just clearly above the rest. I don't know. I'm very curious to see how that shakes out. I just think if you're going to go for an upside play, you might want to just have Kraft in the rear view, but I understand having Musgrave there first. I would just separate, and that's, again, to my point about personal preference, I would separate Mayer from those other young guys, including a Lucas Musgrave there. I don't see him in that as that guy. He's just not that guy.
So I'm the Mayer defendant right now. I'm a stan. I like him, right? Like I liked his film in college. I thought he was the best guy in his class. I had him ranked the highest. I like what he did with the ball in his hand. I thought he was a better receiver than they gave him credit for. I think he was a better blocker than he showed last year. That situation was just atrocious last year, right? Like it was terrible. So I didn't really expect a lot from him last year. I also think it's really hard to judge a tight end by their rookie year. It's really hard to judge them until you get to really year 3 or 4. Then you start to see what they are. It would not surprise me at all. Like you mentioned, I'd rather take Ben Sinnott. Like Ben Sinnott in my mind is not near the prospect Michael Mayer was. And if this time next year you're looking at Ben Sinnott's player card, I think it'll look almost exactly like this.
It probably will. It probably
55 grades all along the board, right? And then he ends the year with 58. Like I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think Mayer now gets the benefit of being 1 year in the pros. Hopefully he does better. Now they have coaching staff figured out. They're going to figure out how to use these guys. They like the dual tight end thing. They're talking about using 12 personnel a lot. I like that, right? Like I like that for Mayer. I think they're going to define a role for him. I think he gets better year over year. I trust the talent. I trust what I saw. That's fine. We can move him to the back of this tier, though. I'm okay with that. And we could also include Tucker Kraft in this tier. I'm okay with that as well. Obviously, he's a Packer, so I'm down for that. How do you start deciding who's the next guy, right? Who's number 13 on this list after Kelce? Is it Likely? Is it Musgrave? Is it Sinnott? Is it Schultz? Is it Ingram? Is it Goedert? Is it Njoku? We need to make a decision on this. And we didn't talk about Isaiah Likely yet.
We didn't talk about Likely, and that's your boy again. I feel like this is another one of your strong feelings. Don't you love Likely?
Yeah, you want me to talk about it?
Talk about it. You're playing hurt. Just go through it. Just talk through the pain.
Isaiah Likely, in my opinion, the best receiving tight end I saw out of college, including Kyle Pitts. The best.
Oh, man.
I think Isaiah Likely has so much to his game as a receiver that mirrors the better receivers in the NFL. And he's also 6'5", 245, right? Is he an inline blocker? Absolutely not. I don't think that's an element of his game right now. If you watch his tape, he looks like a tweener a little bit. And I think that's been to his detriment in the NFL so far. But this past year when Mark Andrews got hurt, you got to see what he could be as a tight end receiving option, right? When he was asked to be the number 1 tight end receiving option there, you saw this breakout by Isaiah Likely because he is special as a receiver. Look at that grading. Seattle, 92.6. Jacksonville, 77. San Francisco, 72. Miami, 71. Pittsburgh, 80, right? Like when he was asked to do the things that he's good at and there was a role for him to be that player, he did phenomenal. There's rumors that he's going to get more opportunities to do that now that they've seen it, now that they've seen him be successful. Again, he's going to be in year 3. I think that's when you start to see what a tight end will really be in the NFL. This is a guy that I'm so high on with his receiving talent that I just can't quit him. Like I just can't. Any league that I'm in, you're going to see I have Isaiah Likely on my team, except for this one. Of course, Dempsey got him. But this is like my boy. Like I think he's going to be phenomenal as a receiving weapon. I'm buying shares of him all day. I think it's like hard because when you get a player drafted by the Ravens as a receiver, that's a receiver, you know that their opportunities are essentially just cut in half, right? Like they're going to have half the amount of receiving snaps as other players will. And that's kind of been to Likely's detriment as well, right? It's like the situation just isn't the one that I thought would be a natural fit for him, although Lamar is great at throwing to tight ends. So again, when Andrews got hurt, we got to see him do better in that regard. I really like Likely. I'm always going to bet on him. I'm always going to take the shares on him because I think there will be a day where he's a top 10 tight end in the NFL. And it's almost like I'm so sure of that I'll just keep buying.
Sure. I don't disagree. I don't have the same view of his overall ceiling as you do. So for me, it's like, okay, sure. If he's there with this list of names, I'll probably take him first also. But I'm not in love with it. Like it's just one of those deals where if I haven't gotten my tight end at this point or to this point, then I'm just like I said, I'm walking in the graveyard. I'm taking whatever I can get, and I'm worried about someone who's not going to lose me the week because they sure as heck aren't going to win me the week. And your view of this is, at least for likely, that in the future he could potentially win you a week. But if Mark Andrews is there, it's probably not going to be in 2024 or 2025.
I agree. So you're comfortable with him being tight end 13?
Let's do him next.
Wow.
I'm comfortable, like at this point, like in my draft room when I'm highlighting all like multiple positions and I'm sorting, I'm just unchecking tight end from like whatever round this is onward. If this is round 14, I'm done picking tight ends.
Wow. See, I kind of think if
39 rounds.
If you didn't get a tight end yet, you kind of got to take like one of each of these groups. You need to take one of the young guys we're talking about right now, like a Musgrave, a Sinnott, a Mayer, or Kraft, and you also have to take one of the old guys, like a Schultz, Ingram, Goedert, and Njoku. Like you almost have to take one of each, and it sucks.
Njoku.
But okay, so then likely being 13, Sinnott, Musgrave, are we going with those guys, or are we going with one of the vets like an Njoku and a Schultz?
I think an Njoku. So here's my thing with Schultz and why I'm going to have Schultz in the back of this tier. Everything it sounds mean. I think everything is with him is the advantage that's been given to him by the systems that he's played in. And I think with the moves that Houston has made, he's going to be even less of a focal point in that offense than he has been. And he's just going to get less of a share of those advantaged looks that he's been able to take advantage of the past 2 years. And with that, it's just his grading's either going to go down or just kind of stay where it is. He's going to be 29 years old a year from now. And it's just kind of this steady, just blah. It's almost like a steady dissension with Dalton Schultz, I think. He's not an uber playmaker. He's not going to create on his own. And so when you don't have a creator or a playmaker at the spot and the offense has weapons elsewhere, and they've invested heavily in weapons elsewhere, both in the pass and run game for that matter, with Mixon coming in as well. I don't see where the great production is gonna come from. He's an okay run blocker, and that's about it. There's no value add there. So to me, he's going to be at the bottom of this tier.
He reminds me a lot of the career arc of Tyler Higbee. It's kind of like when he was good, but he was never great. But he was good for a long time, and he was a solid player for a long time, and that's really nice. But it's like you're saying, it's never going to be a differentiator in a week where you're trying to win a game, right? It's just going to be solid. So yeah. I agree with you. I'm good with putting Njoku at 14. I like Njoku a lot. He's going to be 28 years old, so he still has that 3-year window of success. Obviously, the Browns are kind of bought into him, right? They gave him a pretty massive contract last year. They actually let Harrison Bryant go last year or this year, so a little bit of that competition is gone. Not that there was much, but we like Harrison Bryant here. We think he's a really good player. But Njoku really is the guy they bought into. Really, just phenomenal guy. So I'm good with him at 14 if you are.
Yeah, let's put him at 14. Had more yards last year than I thought he did, but yeah, 14.
Yeah, he was good last year. Njoku at 14, that's where I think I get stuck, right? Because I think there's an argument to be made for Goedert because of the high grading that he's had. There's an argument for Ingram because of the high grading he's had and the fact that Jacksonville essentially needs him to survive at this point. I think there's an argument to be made for Sinnott because they invested a really high pick in him. There's an argument to be made for Musgrave because they invested a high pick in him last year and he did well when he was healthy. I struggle here. I think if it was me, it's probably Musgrave.
Okay, so that's one. So here's the theory with Evan Ingram is that they invested in Brian Thomas Jr. The Jaguars drafted him the first this past April, and Trevor Lawrence is a great deep ball passer, and they didn't really have any great deep threats. But the presence of Brian Thomas Jr. opens up the middle of the field for Evan Ingram like no one was able to do last year in that offense because they just sorely, completely lacked that type of profile at wide receiver. They have it now, and life could be much easier for Evan Ingram. It's going to be his age 30 season, so maybe I'm just looking at a 2-year window here, but I think his situation got a lot better. And so if I can get another mid-70s year out of this guy where he finishes overall tight end 16, if he goes tight end 16 again at this point of our rankings where we're trying to sort these guys out, I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah, I think I would take him here just with that in mind, more of a short-term play. And again, I don't love the options here really, so it's just the best of that situation, but I think this is where I'd have him.
Okay. I didn't expect Ingram to be the choice here. I didn't.
I knew you wouldn't.
Again, I think I would go Musgrave, but okay, let's do Ingram at 15. I'm going to take Musgrave at 16. And then the conversation, I think, is between Sinnott, Schultz, and Goedert.
I would probably go Goedert, Sinnott, Schultz, but can maybe be convinced on those first two.
Why? Yeah. All right. Why Goedert over Sinnott? Give me a little reasoning.
I just know what I'm getting. I like Sinnott. I don't love Sinnott, and like I'm not quite as sure how that offensive fit is going to be once he does develop. He kind of comes into his own, say 2 years from now. Is Daniels the type of fit for him to really ascend into that top tier tight end, or is that style of offense going to be a hindrance? I don't know. That type of style and dual threat at quarterback has really opened things up for tight ends in Baltimore. Is it going to do the same in Washington? I just don't know because I haven't seen it. There's more uncertainty there. Whereas I know what I'm going to get with Goedert, and assuming health, I got a steady presence here, and he's not going to lose me a week.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm on board with that. I don't love Sinnott as a prospect. I didn't, right? I thought it was a little bit of an overpick by Washington. So I'm good with that. Goedert at 17, Sinnott at 18. You didn't like Mayers in that tier, so we're going to move him back, and we're going to talk about the next group of guys, him being a part of it. There's a few young guys that I'm going to talk about right now. We essentially want to get to 24, I think, on this list, right? We're at.
You want to get to 24. I already hit the eject button in my draft. These guys are. I'm not considering any of these guys anymore.
We need to at least give people a backup tight end, right? We need to get to 24. So there's a lot of guys that we could talk about here. Mayer being one of them. I'll tell you the two lists. One's the young guys. One's some of the vets. But Okonkwo, Tucker Kraft, Bellinger, Tip Reedman, Sanders on the Panthers, Theo Johnson Giants, AJ Bardner on the Seahawks, Darnell Washington on the Steelers, Cade Stover on Houston, Jared Wiley on the Chiefs. That's the young group. The older group is Josh Oliver, Will Disley, Taysom Hill, Jack Conkling, Jared Everett, and Hunter Henry. So 2 very different groups here, right? Darnell Washington, you have his card up, just graded so poorly last year. Yeah. But again, it was such a weird system. Will it get better under Arthur Smith? I don't know. But he's a guy that's interesting. You're probably going to dismiss some of these older guys like a Josh Oliver, right?
Almost all these guys. Yeah, Josh Oliver, he like break his back a couple years. I don't know.
But pull up Josh Oliver, right? 75.1 graded season last year, which is pretty darn high, especially considering he's kind of a backup tight end. And he has 2 consistent years of pretty good grading. Really good run blocker, 73.9 run blocking grade. So he complements Hockenson so well. This is a guy that just from a pure grading, and this is why all 22 is different, right? A guy like this, a blocking tight end, even if he's a second tight end in the system, might be really valuable. It might have, a good play, right? Of course, DePalma has him. DePalma is smart like that, right? Like he knows that this is a guy with value. He's going to go after him. Pull up Will Disley for me, right? Will Disley, I told you, I warned you I was going to have this conversation. But Will Disley signed with the Chargers this offseason. He played the rest of his career with the Seahawks. This is a 70s grader throughout his entire career. Has been a really good football player, but dealt with so many injuries. It's funny, if you actually go back in time and remember his rookie season, his second season in the NFL, wasn't all that different, the way people were talking about him to the way they're talking about Sam LaPorta last year. Don't know if you remember that, but he went
I
on a
definitely don't
streak.
remember that.
He went on a streak that was pretty unbelievable. He was crushing it in his first couple years. I don't think he just lost that. I just think the injuries really slowed him down, took away probably the receiving threat that he was. Now he's really a run blocker. On the Chargers, that's perfect, right? This is a team that's going to run the freaking football. They want a guy that's going to have 300 carries a game, according to Austin Eckler, right? So this is a perfect fit in my mind. I think this is a great player for that system. And if he can stay healthy, I don't doubt at all that he'll be grading just as well as the Dalton Schultz, the David Njoku, Evan Ingrams of the world, right? So like that's where all 22 is a little bit different, where Josh Oliver, Will Disley, those run blocking tight ends, they matter and they need to be talked about in that same kind of conversation. Just because they aren't receiving threats doesn't mean they don't deserve to be in that conversation.
Yeah, I'm taking Theo Johnson and Jatavian Sanders, and then those two names, I guess. But like I said, I'm auto drafting at this point in the draft. It's whatever.
What great content, right? Thank you. Thank you for giving us that insight.
Yeah, but I do think, I mean, those are two talented. So you gave the case for the veteran sort of run blocking type of players here, and that's fine. That's great. We did our film breakdown of Jatavian Sanders. I didn't really love it. I loved the receiving aspect of it, but run blocking aspect was just another piece altogether. Theo Johnson, talented player, didn't quite put it all together. Some of that was offensive, just situation, especially this past year at Penn State, and just the middle of the field wasn't able to be utilized quite as much, which was his bread and butter. But he's got the athleticism, he's got the profile. At this point, I'm not letting Will Disley stop me from drafting a talented young tight end for an upside play. I'm hoping that by tight end 18 or whatever number we're on here, that I'm still not looking for my starter. So at this point, I am going to go with the young guys first, the young guys that I think have some talent, which would be Sanders and Johnson, whichever way you want to put them in. I have Theo Johnson over Jatavian Sanders because I think Jatavian Sanders, from what we saw from a blocking perspective, can be a big problem for him in the league. And that's something that's going to have to turn around if he's going to earn coach's trust and have a big enough role that he could potentially have given his athletic ability in the NFL on an offense. So for me, I think the floor is higher for Theo Johnson while he's still, with his athleticism, a very high ceiling player. So I'm taking Theo Johnson, then Jatavian Sanders, and then from there you can go ahead and run 22 personnel and take your blocking tight ends after that.
So I think Theo Johnson makes a ton of sense. Giants just lost Darren Waller. There's going to be a huge opportunity for one of these tight ends, him or Bellinger, to step up and do a lot of damage in that offense. I like Theo Johnson. I like what he has to offer. He just didn't put it all together in college at Penn State. Drew Aller might be to blame for some of that as well.
Go there.
We're at 20, and I don't think there's any shot, though, that I'm taking either of those two guys over Michael Mayer.
I'm taking both of them over Michael Mayer.
There's no shot at all that I'm taking either of those guys over Michael Mayer. Putting my foot down on this one. This is why I gave you all of those ones before, where I was just like, yeah, sure, Ray. Yeah, sure, Ray. Because of
I gave you the first one. No, you didn't. I took that away because you were a coward. No,
you didn't give me anything.
You split the difference.
I did that on purpose. I said I'm not going to take anything right now. I'm going to give you everybody one. I'll give you Evan Ingram at 15 over Luke Musgrave. No problem, Ray.
I didn't care about that one. I didn't care about that at all.
Right now at 20.
And I haven't cared since like tight end 9.
Right. So 20 is going to be Mayer. I'm good with Theo Johnson being 22. I'm good with Jatavian Sanders being 23.
Wait, who's 21?
That's a really good question. I skipped 21. So 21 is Theo Johnson. 22 is Jatavian Sanders. We have 2 more to fill. The conversation for my 2 blockers, we're gonna keep that in mind real quick, but we're gonna talk about a couple other guys real quick, right? Pull up Taysom Hill for me, please.
Oh, I just had him on the screen here somewhere.
So Taysom Hill, for those that don't know, is this quarterback, running back, tight end hybrid for the Saints. He's played all over the place. But I think if they had used him as a pure tight end over his career, we would probably be talking about him in the same breath as George Kittle. Like, I really believe that.
Oh my gosh.
I really believe that. I really do.
This virus has gone to your brain and just completely infiltrated this entire podcast.
So respond, counter.
If respond, he's a quarterback. I mean, he's a 34-year-old quarterback turned gadget player who, when he's physical, it's because he's breaking tackles, which is cool. But like, how do I respond to that? The answer is no. The answer is no. That's just it. Like, the answer is no.
Grading wise, though, like, you have to look at this and say that's pretty impressive, right? This is we're showing our screen right now. 2021 74.8, 2022 75.6, 2023 75.3. Not all of that was at tight end, but still, he counts as a tight end for you in the system. That's pretty good.
I'm going to lay some cover for you here because you have some clear brain fog. Juwan Johnson is injured, out indefinitely. We're not sure how that's going to impact playing time at that slot moving forward. But we've spoken multiple episodes about how the Saints just feel like things are just going to fall apart this year. That's how it feels like. This is the year where it's like, okay, you've kind of lived on the edge long enough with the cap as a credit card, and just this is the year where you stop playing above your, the sum of your parts. Part of that is because if they have to rely on Taysom Hill to have an actual role as an actual tight end in that offense, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I couldn't disagree more. I mean, I agree with the stuff about the Saints, but it's funny, man, because like we had a small conversation about that. But I talked about how, like, a lot of the moves they made are moves I would have made. Not necessarily giving Taysom Hill a huge contract, or other guys they've given huge contracts, but signing Derek Carr to $150 million when Daniel Jones is getting, $175 million or whatever he's getting, and other quarterbacks that are middle tier quarterbacks getting over $200 million now, right? Like, I don't think Derek Carr's contract is going to age that badly unless he does, right? Unless he ages badly, in which case it will. But if you look at the end of last year, he played awesome, Derek Carr, towards the end of the year. I talked about how they draft like I would draft, right? Like, they got Brian Brisset, Isaiah Foskey, and then this year, the tackle that I had is like potentially borderline tackle 2.5 behind Olu and Alt. They took Fuanga right after that, right? They took my guy at tackle. Like, that's what I would have done too. So it's like, you're looking at Derek Carr. That's really good grading for the second half of the season. That's incredible grading at the second half of the season. I think he found himself. I thought he started getting a rhythm. He probably started to get comfortable with that team. Who knows? Like, we're saying it's going to fall apart, but like, what if it just starting to find a little bit of rhythm?
I spot 0 good defenses after this bye week.
Or do you see any for the future? Because like, he's going to be playing the same teams. And that's why he went to that's why he went to the Saints, right? So that he plays Atlanta and Tampa Bay and Carolina. That's why he went there.
Okay, still finishes QB 19. Oh my gosh, I've checked out of tight end long ago, but yeah, I don't know. I would rather put I mean, because this is a popular name, honestly, is Chigoziem Okonkwo at tight end because he is more of a receiving profile, 6'3", under 240 pounds. In Tennessee, they've kind of upgraded the wide receiver room, so it's kind of like there's some more weapons out there to use. So some people are high on him. I'm not quite as high on that situation. Part of that is because of the quarterback fit there and what that's all going to look like. But the offensive line is theoretically improved, and they have great coaching there, like we've discussed. I'm not as nearly as high on Okonkwo as many others are, but I'm taking him over Taysom Hill.
I said his name earlier, and you didn't like really
because I didn't like him. But if you're gonna bet Taysom Hill, I mean, I'll put him in. I'll put him in here. I will put him here. Hunter Henry, I do not have just because he's suffered so many injuries. Yeah. I think that's done. I will throw. No, I won't. I won't throw Adam Troutman in the mix. I thought about it, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah. What about? Let's go back to Tucker Kraft, right? Like, is this where Tucker Kraft needs to go in?
Yeah. If you're talking these names here, or I would Tucker Kraft or Cade Stover even at this point. Cade Stover probably not going to get much out of him this year with Dalton Schultz there and the other weapons, but thereafter, maybe.
Let's go
Good
Kraft at
scheme.
23 and Okonkwo at 24. And that's going to round up
Let's do that.
our top
And
24.
let's just remove Taysom Hill from the platform.
No, Taysom Hill's awesome. I think I'm going to, because like I told you, I'm going to round out the 32 on my own. I think I'm going to put Cade Stover at 25. And then I got to
sit here for 7 more names. I'm not
No.
saying
I'm going to
write an article.
I'll do it on my own time. Who else do you want to talk about, Ray?
That's so. I mean, Eric All, rookie tight end, who went to the Cincinnati Bengals. He's got some ability, some good receiving ability. The issue there is injuries. He suffered a lot of injuries in college, but given a potential clean bill of health, he's going to be in a good offense moving forward. Probably nothing this year, but just something to note. You want to stash somebody very late in a draft as a tight end 3 or something like that. I think Eric All is a name you want to have circled for something like that. A lot of people were high on Cade Otton, and he just hasn't taken that next step. But tight ends take a while. He still has only been in the league for 2 years. We'll see another name if very late as a third tight end, as a flyer, to see if he can hit some of that upside. A lot of people thought he had. I just want to mention a couple of names like that. Darnell Washington, the thing with him is he's got a knee condition, which is why he kind of fell to the end of the 3rd round. So I really liked his tape, and I think, situation is getting better in Pittsburgh and all that good stuff. He's still got Freiermuth there, so he's going to be a complimentary piece. I'm not sure how long that's really going to be a thing for him. So I'm not as high on Washington as I was probably prior to the April 2023 draft overall. So I think just 2 names there. We actually have them back to back, Eric All and Cade Otton. And I think you want to keep stash in the back of your head there for maybe a tight end 3 flyer upside play.
Yeah, those are good names. It's sad to see Darnell Washington with the injury because I did really like his film as well. And I almost think that because of the knee injury, if he focused on being an inline blocking tight end, he probably could resurrect his career, have a lot of success. But if the knee's bad enough, it won't happen. All right, well.
And Wiley too. Sorry, you got to say, I know someone's screaming Wiley, obviously. Yes, after Kelce, we'll see a bit of a different prototype, more, bigger 6'7" type. But Jared Wiley as well. That's a stash. I think everybody knows that by now, given Kelce's age and the situation in Kansas City. So Wiley is someone you might stash for the future as well.
Yeah, and tip on the Cardinals. Tip Riemann, I think is how you say it. Ryman.
You like that? You like the Rymans, huh?
I don't really
Bernard
like him.
Tip?
I don't really like this guy too much. I didn't love his film, but I mean, they invested.
But you don't like him.
They invested a 3rd round pick on him, so I think it's just they obviously invested enough in him where they have a plan on how to use him. Right, 6'5", 265. Maybe he is the blocking tight end to Trey McBride's receiving tight end. Right, kind of talked about that a lot today. I think there are a few guys like that where we're going to see guys that grade really well as receivers that don't get asked to block all that much, and then we're going to see guys that are pure blockers that aren't asked to receive as much. So you really do need to make that differentiator. But I think I'm going to have, I'm probably going to pass out pretty soon. So let's wrap this thing up. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't yet, please give us a review wherever you watch or listen to your podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at all22_PFF, and have a great day.